Greetings and welcome to the ROIClear podcast. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Mr. Jared Nelson. Jared Nelson is responsible for market exploration and technology development at Gore and Associates. They're the people who make Gore-Tex. So we may talk about Gore-Tex, we may talk about mechanical engineering and business. We're going to go all over the place. But before we do that, please join me in welcoming our guest, Mr. Jared Nelson. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you, Ray. Great to be here with you.
Glad to have you here. And to kick things off, why don't we do this the way we do with most of our ROIClear podcast guests? And for those who are new to the ROIClear podcast, Jared is on an elevator with someone he wants to influence. So, Jared, what would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
That I want to influence. I would understand what their goals are, what they are trying to achieve, and how what I want to achieve and what they are trying to accomplish might align or overlap, or if there's any synergy between the two.
Yes.
In 2 minutes.
That's remarkable. So rather than focusing on what you want to look at what they want, and then from there you can figure out whether there's a way for you to come together.
Yep.
Okay, solid. So it sounds like you have a little bit of the element of the servant leader inside of you.
Definitely. That's a huge part of my style of influencing. I think really coming alongside another person, understanding where they're at, where they're walking in their shoes is a huge benefit in becoming a better leader.
Right, to know where they are. Okay. Now, what does it mean? What does market exploration mean? And what does technology development mean in the context of what you're doing?
Yeah. So market exploration means that I am, or Gore is interested in looking at what are some new areas, what are some new either markets or segments within markets where our technologies could be applied and could provide value. Mm-hmm. So that's market exploration is, I spent a lot of time working on a diabetes market project. So Gore doesn't do a lot in the diabetes market space today, but could we leverage our technologies and capabilities in diabetes as an example? And then technology development goes hand in hand. So it's the left hand of that model is as technologies are developing, they need an area to demonstrate their value propositions, to demonstrate that what they can bring value as a product can be demonstrated wholly in a use case, mm-hmm. if you will. So the scientists can go and do a bunch of lab or benchtop testing and show that something's unique or valuable, but the world doesn't really care about that until in a system of interest or in a use case that is shown to be true.
That's very clear. Let me say to you what I think you said to me, and you can tell me if I got it right. Market exploration, you're looking at what people's needs are. This is going back to your elevator pitch example. You want to figure out what people need, where are their pain points. So you figure out where their pain points are, and then you're also looking at what are your capabilities, what are your technology capabilities, what are you going to be able to address. And if we take it a step further in learning more about what the history of Gore-Tex, I saw the video about pulling the Teflon tube, and maybe you can tell us about that. Is it PFTE?
Close. PTFE.
PTFE. All right. So got them switched around a little bit, but pulling and so now you have spaces of air in between the fibers of the PTFE.
Yep. Yeah,
all right.
I'll tell you about that if you want.
Tell us about that. I do want to explore that because it's fascinating because it was Teflon, or Teflon is the marketing name for people who would not remember PTFE, who don't have a chemical engineering background. But so Teflon is the marketing name. But you took Teflon. There's a connection between Teflon and Gore-Tex. So could you connect those dots for us, please?
Yeah, great insights, Ray. So what happened was. The son of the founder. So the founder of Gore and Associates, his name was Bill Gore. Mm-hmm. His son's name was Bob.
Yes.
So Bob Gore was running an experiment. He was trying to figure out a way to make thinner Teflon.
Yes.
So that's PTFE. So he was just trying to figure out how to make it thinner. So he had put a bunch of rods, if you will, of this stuff in an oven, and he was taking it out of the oven, and he was slowly, carefully pulling on it and just trying to stretch it to get it a little bit thinner. And every time he was doing that, it was breaking. So he was getting frustrated,
Right.
as I understand the story. So after multiple iterations of this, carefully trying to make it thinner and pulling it thinner, he got frustrated and just went, the heck with it, and ripped it, tried to just rip it. And to his amazement, it expanded. So not just stretched, it expanded thousands of %. So that was novel, unique. They patent this is a huge patent for Gore, is how that instead of just stretching, it actually expanded, which means the density changed.
Right.
And so back to what we were talking about snowboarding before, the properties that were created by expanding PTFE created a unique ability for this material. So ultimately, in the application of outdoor wear, what it could do is it could let air out, yet moisture wouldn't come in. And so that's why it's been so popular with outdoors garments is you can wear it as you go outdoors and it'll let your body moisture evaporate out of these fabrics, but it won't let the snow and the rain come in.
That is so counterintuitive. So the tiny holes in the fabric, the Gore-Tex fabric, they're so small that water can't get through them, but air can.
Yep.
All because Bob Gore was pulling on these and doing it slow was not working. They were coming apart, but he got angry, and there comes the discovery.
Yep.
And there's so many discoveries like that. I'm reminded of penicillin. The guy left his sandwich out, on the table in the lab, and penicillin was discovered. Or the people who created the 3M Post-it notes. 3M was trying to create a better adhesive, a stronger adhesive. But what they ended up creating was a weaker adhesive, which is exactly what all of us needed for our 3M Post-it notes. So there's so many discoveries like that.
Yep.
So Gore-Tex is in that history, in that chain.
Yeah, that essentially was the discovery of Gore-Tex, that by yanking on that PTFE, he created a new porosity.
Yes.
That then allowed all these inventions to just cascade from that. So we use that same material and that same porosity in outdoors apparel. We use it in our medical devices that are implanted in human beings. So we use it in guitar strings. We use it in multiple different applications because it's such a unique material.
So in your role with market exploration, you're looking at in some of these industries, some of these vertical markets, in medicine or in music with the guitar strings or in outerwear, all of those things.
Yep. Yeah. So Gore is expanding beyond just the PTFE that from 50 years ago. Now we're looking at other materials that might have unique properties. And then how do those unique properties translate to value for a customer?
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out is how can we leverage those unique properties and applications where customers value that performance.
Right.
So just like Bob had discovered that porosity.
Yes.
And then the ideas started just flowing. Where do we need something that's waterproof and breathable?
Right.
Okay, so similar to that question, I'm working on other sets of materials where it has unique properties and trying to figure out who in the world could benefit from those unique properties.
Yes. Now, I'm really curious about the process that you go through when you do that, because there must be certain questions you're asking or certain ways you observe. And I'd imagine it would be hard to ask those questions. You know, Henry Ford, I don't know if this is true or not, but they say that Henry Ford said that if he had asked people what they wanted, they would have told him a faster horse, and he never would have invented an automobile, right?
Right.
So how do you ask questions, or how do you observe, or how do you prod or prompt people to give you the info you need so you can turn these scientific discoveries into something useful?
Well, it goes back to what we had talked about in the elevator pitch.
Yes.
So the way I've been trained and the method I've found most beneficial is the customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go out and you understand what that potential customer is going through in their day, what are they struggling with? What are they frustrated with? What do they really enjoy about this particular part of their use case?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can back out and say, okay, there's a pain point. There's frustration. Where there's frustration, where there's pain points, that's the goal. That's where there's opportunity.
Right.
So to come back to Gore-Tex, if you were to go hiking in the snow in the 70s and 80s, you would have been just sweating profusely because you would have had a non-breathable jacket on.
Right.
And so if you would have gone and interviewed hikers, you would have said, hey, what don't you like about hiking? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm just sweating profusely. I can't keep this on because I sweat too much, but I need it on because it's so cold and snowy outside. So there's where the gold is, where the frustration is.
So you're looking for the frustration. They need to be angry, and they need to have the resources to do something about it.
Well, they don't necessarily have the resources. So they just need to have the customer, the user
Right.
experience is expressing, this is what I'm frustrated with. This
Right.
is my obstacle. This is what I can't figure out how to make it better. And I come in and say, now, does that frustration fit or align with a capability or technology that I have?
Right. You have to be a good listener,
You have to be a really good listener.
and you have to be a good observer.
That's actually the key skill, is not interjecting your answer, your solution. So as engineers, we're trained to come up with solutions.
Yes, right.
You have to turn that off.
Yeah.
You have to literally just be neutral and listen to what they're telling you without interjecting the solution.
Mm-hmm. How do you turn that off? You're a mechanical engineer by training. How do you turn that off? Or do you dial it down, or what goes on in your head when you're making that adjustment?
I think for me, for other people it might be different. For me, I think it comes down to curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Genuine curiosity. I really want to hear
Yes.
what the next two sentences you have to say. I'm not as eager to jump in with the solution. I really am curious about why that frustrates you, why that's a pain point for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that curiosity, I think, is what helps me keep the engineer solver out of the room.
All right. So if there are different types of engineers, if there's an engineer that is curious, that wants to learn what's going on, then there may be a type who is more of a problem solver, who wants to solve the problem. So you're one who's curious and you want to know what's going on deep down below.
Yeah. Well, there is a time to bring in the problem solving.
Yes. Okay.
But really, you need to set the table with understanding the customer experience, understanding the customer needs and pain points. Once that table is set, then you can bring in the problem solving and go to town.
Yeah.
But if you bring it in too early, it spoils the outcome.
Sure. They might be in the middle of revealing their pain or sharing what's going on in here. In there might be a nugget of a future product or a future use or a future application. So you want to make sure that you're silent long enough for them to give you that answer.
Yeah. And at Gore, what we've done historically is what we call customer interviews. So we'll go and we'll connect with physicians, clinicians, nurses, and we'll have 30 to 45-minute interviews with them. And it's like I said, like no solution is ever presented. It's purely tell me about what you're trying to accomplish as a physician or a clinician. tell me about what kind of struggles you're having, what kind of pain points, what kind of frustrations, what are the obstacles, what are the barriers, what are the challenges to accomplishing what you want to accomplish. And they won't hold back. There's a list of 10 or 15. And I can't solve all 10 or 15, but at the conclusion of that interview, then I start thinking, okay, which of those pain points, which of those obstacles can I help with?
Right.
And that's where there's opportunity. So I've conducted literally hundreds and hundreds of these interviews as part of market exploration. Coming back to your kickoff,
Right.
that's what we call market exploration is.
Right.
Understanding unmet market needs.
Now, Jared, you've been doing this for over 20 years. And I'm curious, how did you develop this skill? Did you have this coming out of school, or did you have really good mentors? Did you read a lot of great books? Did you fall down and hit your head one day and you woke up, you all of a sudden had this skill? Maybe you can connect the dots between your ME degree and having that skill.
Yeah, I think, so I think in college when I was studying engineering, I wasn't the typical engineer in my class.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the rigor and the challenge of the engineering courses, and I'm very mechanical in nature, so I'd probably label myself as a kinetic learner.
Yes. Yep.
But there's other dimensions to my approach to life. So I've always had a strong interest and curiosity in business. My father was an accountant. He had his own accounting firm. So we always had Forbes magazines lying around.
Yes.
I was always kind of interested in business stuff. And I always knew in the back of my mind that I had some business itch that I needed to scratch. Also, I think I'm probably more extroverted than average engineer, and so I enjoy talking with people. I enjoy talking to strangers. That probably goes back to, when I did an LDS mission in Colombia, just talking to all sorts of people in a foreign country.
Right.
So yeah, there's probably a bunch of different things that fed into that curiosity. But I would say the bottom line is just I'm hugely curious. Like I love understanding the world and trying to figure out the world. I've always had that part of my personality.
Got it. And what was it that attracted you to W.L. Gore? I read a little bit about the history of the company, how W.L. Gore himself was at DuPont and worked with Teflon there, and then developed a product that eventually became Gore-Tex. But what drew you to that company?
Yeah, what drew me to that company was probably the unique culture that it had. So everyone's read a little bit about how the no bosses, no titles culture. I was really lucky. I found when I was in undergrad, I found an advertisement for an internship. It was, I think it was outdated. It was left on the college wall there. And I contacted them, and they didn't have any internships that year. But the next year I followed up, and they did have internships, and I got one. I really wanted to get out into the engineering field and do internships. I thought that was really important, and I absolutely loved the culture where the person that was responsible for me was really trying to help me. He wasn't trying to micromanage me. He was really gave me all the tools and everything I needed to complete and be successful in my projects. But then he kind of just let me run until I tripped, and then I'd come back and ask for his help or ask for guidance, and so it felt really unique. A really unique place to work.
Yeah. You just described what you call kinetic learning right there. You went out until you tripped, and then he pulled you back and then helped you, sent you on your way again.
Yep.
And I bet the next time you went out, maybe you tripped again, but you tripped further along the path. So that's how the learning works.
Yeah.
Wow, you
that's
just
how I
brought
learned.
back a ton of memories. I loved internships. The courses, engineering coursework was fine, doing the problem sets and all of that, but I loved the internships. You get to meet people. I was fortunate like you to work with some really great mentors, and they just push you, but they're not pushing you explicitly, I guess. And I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt that I was pushed because I wanted to contribute value to someone who I looked up to and who I admired. Is
Yeah.
that something you felt? Did you feel that in any way, or is that?
If I had some people that I really admired,
Or what did you feel that your drive, your determination to achieve was more a result of the admiration you felt for your colleagues rather than feeling that someone was standing over you? Is that?
yeah, I think that's a huge part of the culture is you feel like you're a part of a team and you want your team to succeed.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not you're trying to appease some upper level, checkbox.
Right.
But it's really like, hey, I want to pull my weight. I want to be a productive member of
Yes.
this team.
Yes.
That's a huge part of the culture there.
Right.
Huge.
Right. Now, it's abnormal for someone with a technical background to be at one company for a few decades. Where's the magic? What is the magic that pulls you in there?
Yeah, I think the magic is that I've had the good fortune that I've been able to have multiple roles.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was doing today the same thing I was doing in 2001 when I started, I would be on board. But the magic at Gore for my experience has been about every 3 to 4 years pivoting into a different area.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out as a process engineer, a manufacturing engineer, supporting commercial lines, pivoted into new product development, pivoted into leadership, pivoted into this market exploration, pivoted into portfolio management. So just being able to do different things about every 3 to 4 years, that's magic.
Yes. So
That-
you've pivoted. Yes.
That keeps me on the hook.
Right. So you're always learning something new and you're always challenged.
Always challenging. That's one of my core tenets is I need to be on a steep learning curve. As soon as I get on a shallow learning curve, I'm looking for a new learning curve.
You want something else. Got it. Got it. In all of that, you mentioned leadership at one point. When did you realize that you were a business leader?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm a business leader at Gore today, but I've always had strong business curiosity. I probably should have taken like a couple of econ classes or something when I was in college instead of, more thermodynamics. I probably should have taken more econ. But I've always had a super strong business curiosity. So even when I was doing really hardcore engineering, I got a subscription to the Harvard Business Review and was reading
Yes,
that
yes.
during lunch. I really enjoyed that. So I think there's been that curiosity around business has always been a part of my career interests. And then as I got further in my career, I was able to when I started being able to do this market exploration, that started to scratch the itch that had been there for a long time. And I had some great people that I worked with. And I think that comes back to your earlier question.
Yeah.
When you have a really positive team dynamic, you up your game.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
had that experience where my co-team person that I was working on with was just out of this world fantastic.
Yes.
And she just helped me elevate my game.
Sure.
So there was a really positive synergy there between culturally and being able to itch that business itch with, marketing or being able to, look at market potential. So really going out and assessing like what are these opportunities look like from a revenue standpoint, from a profit standpoint, from a growth standpoint. How strong is our technical fit here, our solution? How well do we understand those customer needs? That whole picture, putting that together, I love that. I love that.
take us through that, if you will. I mean, I'm tempted to ask you questions about specific products, but I know there's some things you probably can't talk about, so I'm not going to dig into that. But can you tell us a story about a product that maybe you were developing or a customer with a particular pain that you were uncovering, and walk us through how that process works?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you about one that's fairly public knowledge. So the diabetes one,
Yes.
for example. So diabetes affects a lot of people. We know, 1 in 3 Americans is at least pre-diabetic. So it's a big societal issue. So as a company, Gore was investigating, what could we do in the diabetes arena. So me and my colleague, we went out and interviewed a ton of clinicians. So in this case, they're called endocrinologists.
Yes.
They're specialists in hormones, the human hormones, and and then a lot of nurses. And we kind of really understood the diabetic experience. So people with diabetes take on a lot of personal responsibilities. So this is a disease state that you can't just walk into a hospital and walk out and feel cured.
Yeah.
You have to manage it every 15 minutes. You're calculating your food consumption. What type of food are you intaking? How is that going to impact your glucose? How much insulin do you need to inject in order to be able to treat, not have a high glucose or a high blood sugar? And so what we realize is there's a huge patient burden.
Yes.
So unlike if you break your knee and you go in and get it fixed, this is a burden that they carry day in, day out, oftentimes throughout their entire life. And it's a mental burden. It's a spiritual and a physical burden that they carry. So what we understood is if we can lessen that burden in any way, shape, or form, we could help. So we understood that was the burden. Through the course of, we did probably over 100 interviews with diabetic clinicians, clinicians in the diabetes space. We came to find a company that had a novel treatment methodology for this. And, and I can reveal this. It's a company called Physiologic. And what they were trying to do different was, instead of injecting insulin subcutaneously through your fat, they had an implant. And this implant releases insulin. And by doing that through the peritoneal arena, the insulin is able to get to your liver in about half the time that it gets through a
Peritoneal, I'm not familiar.
So yeah, it gets into a little bit deeper anatomy.
yeah.
But so the peritoneum is that space in between your fatty tissue, skin tissue.
Yes.
And then there's the peritoneum, is that little slip plane before you go into where all your organs are kept. There's a little bit of a slip plane there called the peritoneum.
Okay.
And so what we found was this company had a unique way of helping diabetic patients by making their insulin delivery more effective, more efficient. So we worked with this company for a few years to come up with what we were hoping would be a better delivery system, so that insulin comes out of a disc and it goes through a silicone tube and into the body. And so what we were hoping was that tube, we could make that tube more less bioreactive. So our materials, we know through decades and decades of implanting thousands and thousands of devices, our materials are very bioinert.
They're not rejected by the body.
They're not rejected by the
And they
body.
don't disturb any of bodily functions. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So
That's a really big deal.
So what we were trying to do is we were trying to help this company by making their device more bioinert with our materials. So, and therein, we went to France and we talked to patients that had this treatment and they absolutely loved it. So we knew it was something that was making a difference in those pain points. It was making their lives easier, better, more functioning. And so it was addressing those pain points.
How far? This is fascinating. You're right in here, yeah, because you're helping diabetics from what you described. Current state of the art right now is that they have to monitor themselves, monitor their bodily functions every 15 minutes. But if they had a device that was installed, I'm saying installed like it's a computer, body machine,
implanted
subcutaneously. If it's installed subcutaneously, then they don't have to monitor themselves every 15 minutes. There's that device that's doing that work for them.
Well, they still have to, so there are continuous glucose monitors.
Yes.
That monitor your glucose continuously and can show it on a phone.
Right.
But we were working on something different. This was insulin delivery. So right now, if you have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you need to inject yourself with insulin to make sure that your glucose, your blood sugar, doesn't get too high. Mm-hmm. Okay, because insulin takes glucose out of the bloodstream. Because if your glucose runs too high, then you are at risk for a lot of different issues,
right?
Blindness, amputation, if you run your glucose too high too long.
Yeah.
Now, if you run your glucose too low, you can go into a coma.
Mm-hmm.
So lows are bad and highs are bad.
So you need a happy medium.
So you're always trying to like juggle between low and high.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mental math that diabetic patients are always running.
Sure.
Continually running. Parents are losing sleep over it.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you have a better way to inject insulin, then the math and the juggling becomes a little easier.
So
the better way to inject it is through the intraperitoneal instead of through subcutaneously. So it's a better way to inject the insulin more effectively.
And is it injecting the insulin? I need to ask questions about this. There's a lot about this I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to be asking some very elementary questions, but are the insulin injections happening at a periodic rate based on time, or are the injections happening based on when the body needs the insulin?
Both.
Really?
So there's what they call there's a metabolic need ongoing, like a baseline need that you need to just manage your baseline blood sugar on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Then there's what they call bolus. So when you eat food, when you eat a meal or a snack, then you're going to get a blood sugar spike, and that's what they call a bolus. So you'll need to inject also at that point to bring that spike down and not have that spike be too high.
Sure. And our bodies naturally are doing that. In people who are non-diabetic, our bodies are naturally doing that.
Your pancreas naturally does that. Your
Right.
pancreas will sense how much sugar is in your blood, and it will release the appropriate amount of insulin automatically.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is remarkable. I want to drill down into this so deep. There's so much that you're sharing that's just fascinating. Are medical applications, is that your particular specialty? Is that what you're focused on? Or that is, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so where I ended up with Gore in Flagstaff, Arizona, that's the medical headquarters. And that's where, for the past 40 plus years, Gore has been investing in and developing medical devices that are, very, very well known, very effective for the various diseases that they treat. So Flagstaff is my home base. That's where I landed. So I've always had a strong medical kind of aim.
That's amazing. Who is it? There's a physician. His background is in mechanical engineering, I think. His name is Bird, if I'm remembering correctly. This is a guy he was a mechanical engineer. He developed a device that would help children with respiratory problems breathe easier. And he was a mechanical engineer, presented it to a bunch of physicians. They didn't want to hear anything he had to say because he was an engineer. He wasn't a doctor. He was an engineer. Why should they listen to him? So he said, okay, I'm going to go to medical school, get an MD, And maybe then they'll listen to me. So that's exactly what he did. His name is Bird. I need to look that up. Maybe we'll include that in the show notes. But
Yeah.
just listening to you, listening to your enthusiasm and your desire to just learn and the way you collaborate with people, it just reminds me of that. You know, you're solving problems in an area where you're fascinated and you are constantly educating yourself. And I can only imagine the number of people that are helped by these devices you're working on.
Yeah, that's the cool part is you really are making a difference in people's lives.
Wow. Man, Jared, we're coming towards the end of our time together. I want to ask you a whole lot more questions, but I want to make sure we respect your time and respect the time of our listeners and everything. I would like to have you back, and we'll talk further at some point. As we wrap things up, I know you're a constant learner. What are you reading right now that you would like to recommend to our audience, or what are you listening to on podcasts? How do you sharpen this saw between your ears?
Yeah, I'll give you both. So I'm a big Andrew Huberman fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I consume his podcasts like candy.
Yes.
Anytime I can, I just try to rip through his podcasts. I think his podcasts are great. I'm a little nerdy, so it does get down to the nerdy level.
Yes.
Book-wise, I think it's called The Game of Tennis. Can you guys look that up?
Okay.
I don't know if it basically talks about how I'm only in the beginnings of the book, but it basically talks about how the inner game of tennis.
The inner game of tennis.
The inner game of
tennis. Okay.
Yeah, so far I like it. I like it a lot. It's kind of talking about how when we're learning things and we're developing things, it's easy to, a lot of tennis coaches will say, work on this, how you hold your racket or how you place your feet.
Mm-hmm.
But the book is kind of advocating more for focus on the seams of the ball. And if you focus on the seams of the ball, then your feet will be more likely to align, and your arm will be more likely to align by focusing on. It's almost like the outcomes you want instead of like, hold your feet in a specific way. The jury's still out. I'll let you know how it goes. But it's an interesting book on how our minds develop.
Yeah. Focus on the seams of the ball. Don't worry about where your feet are positioned. Your feet will position themselves if you focus on the seams of the ball.
Basically.
And your hand will position itself on the racket. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. That is something that I need to add to my list then.
Okay.
And then finally, how can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I have my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Jared Nelson, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today on the ROIClear podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Ray. It's great talking with you.
And thank you for engaging the ROIClear podcast. At ROIClear, we buy multifamily apartment properties, we improve them, and we give people a great place to live. At the same time, we give investors an opportunity to enjoy capital preservation, tax advantages, and a solid return on investment. If you'd like to know more, click the link to ROIClear.com down below. We look forward to speaking with you.